Hey guys, I wanted to give you a sense of what I meant when I was asking that you guys build a 2D vector line drawing for your exercise. And if you really think about it, this is one of the most important parts of the project because this is the moment where you really design the kind of image that you want to project into your space. And so it's really important that you spend some time with this and design something that you like and that you're interested in in seeing come alive three-dimensionally and playing around with the way that it skews and creates different kinds of perceptions from different points of view inside of your space. But you should also keep in mind that the more complex that you make your line work drawing, the more difficult it will be to actually build in physical space. And so as you can see here, here is an example of a vector line drawing that I made and that I will actually show you how to project into your 3D model and later on into your physical environment. And as you can see, this is a fairly complex drawing. It's a black and white line work drawing that creates a kind of cube with our the letters of space form process sort of embedded into it to create a series of spatial illusions, right? So even within this graphic, I was already trying to make some kind of spatial illusion that would then be even more heightened or exaggerated when we built it as a physical object, right? And so important things to know, what exactly are vector drawings? Those are drawings that are made up of editable pieces, right? So as opposed to something that you would make in Photoshop, if you're working, in Illustrator, it means that each one of the lines is a distinct object that can be edited, right? And you will actually probably start out by creating your own uh, vector drawing from scratch, right? And so at the end, that means that all of this information, when we bring it into Rhino, it comes in as editable line work, just like the Make 2D sort of objects that you guys built in Rhino or a couple of weeks ago. And so that means that we can do things with it inside of our 3D software. Okay, so that's what we mean by vector. Now let's talk about how a couple of different ways, since I know that some of you have never used Illustrator, that you could begin to build a kind of image, right? And so for that, let's start out with a new blank screen. So as you can see, when you open Illustrator, you'll start out with a blank canvas. Here you have all the or a majority of the tools that you can use. You can always try to find additional tools here. There's a lot of them, and then you'll have here a lot of your properties windows. Okay, right? So I'm going to delete that because I don't need it right now. Okay, so a couple of different ways that you could make different kinds of vector line work information. Well, there's a line tool, right? And so if you click and hold, you can draw a line. The only problem with that is that that line extends between 2 points. So I can make another one, but those are distinct, right? So one of the things that you could do is, instead of making different lines, you could use the pen tool, and you can create kind of the same thing as in Rhino, but you can create a continuous polyline. And if you go back and click on the beginning anchor, you sort of close it, right? So you can create closed polylines the same way that we did in Rhino, but in Illustrator, right? The difference here is that afterwards, if you go here, you can edit those. So you can add or delete anchor points. So I could, for example, get rid of this anchor point, right? And then I can also edit the anchor points themselves. So for example, here, I could click and hold and then make this a curved set of lines instead of straight, right? So I could, for example, do that. So that would be one way in which you could begin to assemble or design a graphic, a 2D graphic. Of course, you could also start out. I could move these out of the way, and you could start out with a basic polygon. So there's a polygon tool. You can start out with rectangles, rounded rectangles, etc. And in this case, I'm going to choose a polygon. If you just click it once, it'll ask you how many sides you want and the radius. So I'm going to choose a radius of 2 and 6 sides, right? Which produces a hexagon. And I can show you guys here really quickly. If I take this hexagon and I turn it 90 degrees, right? And then I sort of select my pen tool and I click on, make this, that sort of triangle point there again, and I can actually take that, move it vertically up, right? And then now I can draw a line, and all of a sudden I have very quickly, right, build that three-dimensional cube, right, isometric cube that was the beginning of this project. And in fact, that's kind of how I began, right? And then of course I gave it some thickness and then inserted the letters. And I'll show you actually, because I ended up doing that all in Rhino, right? So those are a variety of different ways in which you could, in Illustrator, start making your vector files. You could also, of course, and it's an important thing to note, is that you can also draw with the paintbrush, but that produces, if you see a vector line that has a lot of information, where it tries to simplify it. In this case, it simplified it, right, to a certain number of inflection points. So it does a lot of the same sort of operational logic of Rhino. You can also create text. Text, when it comes in, it's still functioning as text, so you have to convert it into Linework if you want to import it into your into Rhino later. So we could, type, I don't know, a word that maybe I like this one, bear in Spanish, but I like how it's symmetric. I could choose a different kind of font. Right, and it's still right now it's operating as type, but I can now go into type and I can create outlines out of it. And if I switch this now, you can see now this is acting as vector line work, right? So you could actually create a kind of graphic based off of text if you were so inclined. And then the final way in which you could maybe begin to create a kind of vector graphic would be to import a raster file or an image file and convert it into a vector file. And so in order to do that, I'm going to show you guys quickly how we could maybe do that, attempt that. And so what I would do here is I would select and I would search, and just for ease, I've searched for silhouettes and I chose dogs and I downloaded this one, right? So now if I go into here, back into our Illustrator file, I can open that file. And you'll see when it comes in, this file comes in and it's very different than all of these other ones where we can edit each one of the different components, because it comes in as a raster file. And so, it's sort of all one single image, including the white background, right? But Illustrator has a kind of a smart tool which you can take a raster file, and if you go down here to image trace, you can make and expand. Okay, so you saw a quick change when I did that, and now it's a vector file. It's still grouped, so you have to select Control-Shift-G to ungroup it, and maybe do that one more time. And now I can actually select the object itself, and here now I can turn it into line work. Okay, so now this would be ready also to import into Rhino. Okay, to import it into Rhino, I'm going to go back to this one, but you just actually save it as an Illustrator file. So I would go here, save it as to my desktop as an Illustrator file. I'm going to say yes, because I already saved it. Okay, import it. So I would open Rhino and I would actually just type import. And I can import, preserve the units. And you can see it there, right? So that will bring it in. When you bring it in, you'll notice, right? It brings it in and all of these are editable, right? And so that means that I can actually now project this once I've modeled my 3D space. And so you will see in the following tutorials next week how to grab this line work drawing, uh, place it and look at it through a particular camera set, and then project it onto your 3D modeled room, and use that projection to then build it in your actual space.